and we have an agenda. We now move to recognitions, reports, and presentations. And our first and only report is the best report is the Cary 150 History Moment, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Mr. Yerha has for us today. Mr. Yerha.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Tonight's topic is the Civil War in Cary. Although there was no Battle of Cary as such, Cary, or what soon in just a few years would become Cary, played a definite role. The war, of course, began on April 12, 1861, when Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter, South Carolina. And most people think that the war ended on April 9, 1865, when General Lee surrendered to General Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. But not so fast. The war was not yet finished, and the following 2 weeks would bring the closing moments of the war right through the heart of Cary. The day after Lee's surrender on April 10th, General Sherman was poised in Goldsboro with 90,000 well-equipped Union soldiers. That very day, he sent a cavalry of 5,000 men, led by General Kilpatrick, to attack General Johnston's 20,000 tired, hungry, and ill-equipped Confederate troops stationed 20 miles away in Smithfield. Informed of Kilpatrick's imminent attack, Johnston began withdrawing his troops westward toward Raleigh and Cary under the protection of a Confederate cavalry of 4,000 commanded by General Joseph Wheeler. Over the next 2 days, Johnston's Confederates traveled the almost 30 miles through Raleigh and then along the railroad tracks through Cary and Morrisville in an effort to reach Greensboro, where Confederate President Jefferson Davis had fled. When Johnston met with Davis, Davis showed no signs of quitting, and he talked of raising new armies instead. But other Confederate leaders, like North Carolina Governor Zebulon Vance, were not so confident. In fact, on the night of April 12th, Vance fled the capital and sought protection with Confederate General Hoke's division of about 5,000 men who were camped in and around, you guessed it, Cary. Vance was smart to flee, for hot on Johnston's trail the next day, April 13th, Union General Kilpatrick's men entered Raleigh, but Wheeler's Confederate troops counterattacked. Wheeler boasted, "I placed the Alabama Brigade in position. I met and countercharged the enemy, driving Kilpatrick back some 2 miles, killing or capturing some of the enemy." But Kilpatrick's Union forces recovered, and they resumed their attack. At noon on the 13th, General Kilpatrick sent this message to General Sherman from Asbury Station, which once stood right here on East Chatham Street. "Wheeler is fighting stubbornly. I shall press him hard," he said. 3 hours later, Kilpatrick sent another message to General Sherman, this time from Morrisville Station. "I have pressed the rebels back 2 miles beyond this town on the road to Chapel Hill. Wheeler's cavalry is totally demoralized." So on April 14th, the fighting ceased, and some soldiers scoured the area looking for food and valuables. They slaughtered Cary resident Wesley Jones's oxen for meat, and they stole his family's silver. Not all relations were sour, however. Sally Jones found a sick Union soldier in her barn, which stood not far from the Nancy Jones house. She nursed him back to health, and as a token of his appreciation, this Union soldier later sent her a gold ring. For the next 2 days, General Sherman set up his headquarters in Raleigh. To keep pressure on Confederate General Johnston, Sherman deployed his 17th Corps to Cary and his 15th Corps to Morrisville. The 17th Corps followed the railroad into Cary and were ordered to push empty railroad cars along the rails to detonate any unexploded bombs left on the track. Apparently they found none, for their commander's official report for that day merely stated, "We marched to Page's Station. Roads in bad condition and raining hard." En route to Cary, the 17th Corps learned that General Johnston proposed a surrender. And one soldier, Colonel Oscar Jackson, described how the men received the news. The troops halted as they successively heard the cheering in front of them, and at the time it was raining a torrent, but mounted officers were galloping commands announcing the news. The men were throwing away their guns and the officers their hats in such wild excitement I never saw. Some of the same troops who now propose to surrender and give us peace we've been fighting for almost 4 years. Yes, they were celebrating in Cary that night. Walter Hines Page was just 9 years old when he was astounded at the sight of some 30,000 Union soldiers marching past his home which stood on this very site of our council chambers. Walter, who would become Cary's most famous citizen and the eldest son of Frank and Kate Page, Cary's founders, never forgot this experience, especially when he became involved in a later conflict as U.S. ambassador to England during World War I. During peace negotiations, 17th Corps Commander General Francis Preston Blair, Jr. established his headquarters at the Nancy Jones House, which of course still stands on Chapel Hill Road. Although Blair served in the Union Army, he was Kentucky-born, and he spared Cary from the damage and looting that most southern towns experienced under Union occupation. Because he had studied at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, he still had friends in the area, and he expressed a particular fondness for this area. You see, even then, everyone liked Cary. His ability to keep peace among his men proved most challenging, though, on April 17th, when news of President Lincoln's assassination made many Union soldiers ready to move on Johnston at once. Despite powerful emotions, Blair's men remained mostly peaceful, and one soldier, identified only by the initials RM, wrote a poem about the fallen president that the Raleigh Standard published 2 days later. You'll notice the reference at the bottom to Page's Station, the name that many people used for Cary before it became Cary 6 years later. Peace negotiations between Confederate General Johnston and Union General Sherman also began on April 17th. That was at Bennett Place in Durham. After 3 rounds of negotiations, the final terms of surrender were signed. And after the largest and final surrender of the American Civil War on April 26th, a Union major stationed here in Cary wrote of the occasion, "No pen can tell the feeling of joy and triumph that flooded every heart as the war-worn soldiers looked forward to peace and to home." And General Blair's 17th Corps departed Cary the following day. The war was finally over. And so is this presentation. Except to say thank you to those folks who are listed here who gave invaluable help to this presentation, and asking you to save the date, July 24th and July 31st. There's going to be a memorable and historic celebration of Cary's 150th anniversary in downtown Cary. And as always, you can find out more about this and about the other celebrations going on in town at cary150.org. I thank you for listening tonight, and now back to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ed. Fascinating. I could listen to you talk all night, but we got to move on. All right, Public Speaks Out is our next item on the agenda.